This is Coffee with Kelly, a dynamic podcast that's dedicated to driving positive change in school safety. I'm your host, Ethan Woodman, Product Marketing Specialist for Crisis Go, and I'm joined by my esteemed colleague, Kelly Moore, Senior School Safety Specialist for Crisis Go. Our mission is to empower you with essential knowledge, tools, and inspiration required to foster a safer and more secure school environment. We hope this podcast will be the catalyst for transformation in your schools. Join us as we continue to dive into the world of school safety. Kelly's always trying to make me laugh.
I am.
Well, good morning, Kelly. How are you?
Good morning. I am good. Life is good.
Life is good. Anything exciting with you lately? I feel like
I've been traveling a lot,
That's true.
That's been a little disruptive, but we had a good safety summit that was hosted by AWS and Gwinnett County Public Schools down in Atlanta, Georgia. So that was the most exciting thing in the last week or so, but it was good. We brought in a bunch of partners. We presented along the timeline, and as you know, I'm a big fan of referencing the timeline so people understand the timeline in an incident. And so the format of the presentations was exactly kind of what I do, is showing where the products are, the solutions that vendors have and partners have, and where they sit on that timeline. So kudos for them for inviting us, and it was a good little it was a one-day safety summit. So
nice.
Yeah, it was very good.
As usual, we're gonna start off with our news section. So
hang on to your hats for this one. and I'm gonna do something I have never done.
Oh boy.
I'm going to give you a warning because this is going to be sensitive and it's going to be graphic. We're going to show you a picture that's been just buzzing around all of the social medias, but I think it not only suggests that we should discuss it, but I think it almost demands that we do.
Yes.
And that's why we're going to address this. It can very easily be taken as a political statement. And that's not the intent of why we're bringing it here. We're bringing it here to bring it into the context of school safety and why this is silly, to put it mildly.
Yeah, put it very lightly. To start off, so this was around Halloween, and a group of teachers decided to all get together and wear the same t-shirt.
High school setting?
High school setting. I still have yet to find out when this occurred. I don't know if they wore this during school or in a school event, but I mean, they're all together. So my assumption would be it had to do something with school.
And it's apparent that the photo was taken, at least from my perspective, on school campus.
Yeah.
It looks like a little courtyard.
I would agree with that. So yeah. This has sparked a lot of outrage and controversy and all the other stuff, probably nationally at this point.
Mm-hmm.
There's definitely some issues here that we need to talk about and relate to school safety. So I'm just going to share this, and let's see if I can get it here. Take a look at this, and you guys tell me what this is about. I think the initial response was this was obvious. Pretty much everyone thought this was in relation to a certain event that occurred earlier this year. The response from the teachers in the school district was that it had nothing to do with it.
Right.
Which is
so. All right. So we have the visual. Everyone sees it, and it says problem solved. Right. Mm-hmm. And they're all very similar shirts. Problem solved with what it appears to be blood-stained on the left side of the body. Okay, that's the context. We don't need to show it any longer, Ethan.
Okay.
Other than what is causing the obvious political statement here is, and the school's saying, we're not going to do anything about this because they said this was in relationship to a math problem. Right? That was their excuse. And when I talk about threat assessments, and I talk about this pathway to violence, and when I talk about the cycle of violence, and when I talk about when you start interviewing and doing your investigation, your assessment of where somebody lands on the pathway to violence, we have a tendency to put too much weight on the excuse that is given. I was just kidding. I didn't mean it. Right? And in fact, there are some threat assessment models that say if somebody apologizes for what they said or did or posted, and they withdraw the threat, I'm going to kill you or what have you, then they didn't really mean it. And I will tell you that that is likely incorrect. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a behavioralist, a scientist. I'm not. But I have seen many, many, many thousands of cases where somebody who got in trouble has said, I didn't mean to do it. I didn't mean to hurt him. I didn't mean to steal this. I didn't mean to fire this weapon. I didn't mean to do that. It goes on and on, all these types of excuses. But the fact of the matter is that it happened. And we cannot overlook the obvious because somebody got caught or they caused some sort of uproar or what have you. The reason I'm saying that is because I don't care what the context of the reason for wearing those shirts to a high school. This is what it says. And this is why there's an uproar. First of all, the obvious political connection. But here we are, 26 years almost past Columbine. Is that right?
Yeah. I think we're at 26.
We're at 26. Yeah. So next year is going to be 27. And we're trying to get violence out of our schools. And then we have a group of 7 or 8 teachers that walk in with a blood-stained shirt and says problem solved, indicating that violence is a viable solution to solving problems. I don't know how many times on this podcast we have said, stop doing stuff like this. Stop doing things that give kids the idea that this is a good solution. Stop causing harm to our kids. What do you think would happen if, and I'm not saying it's not going to happen. I'm just saying it hasn't happened yet. But somebody from that school, some kid who's struggling, who's there, and he goes, oh. And that's the thing that says, I now have a solution to my problem. I don't know if these shirts were made by them. I don't know if they were commercially made, because you can find some things that are very similar.
Yeah.
But they all detect violence. I don't know how you can get a group of adult teachers, educators, I don't even know what their roles are.
They're all math teachers.
All math teachers.
Yeah.
But look, let me qualify that. I had an administrator who, confronted with trying to do a threat assessment, identified, and I know I'm going to get some, not as an administrator, but as an English teacher. I think I've said this story before. I had a couple of kids that were fairly high level threats. And so we were doing a threat assessment on it. And as I looked over at the principal, he had this sort of dumbfounded look on his face, and basically was saying, I'm paraphrasing, basically saying, Kelly, what do I do? This isn't my job. And I looked over and I says, this is your job. This is what you signed up to do as a principal. He says, I'm just an English teacher. You stopped being an English teacher when you signed the promotion papers that said you were going to be a principal. You stopped being an English teacher then. You now have the responsibility of keeping your kids safe at a very high level. So if they're saying, oh, we're just all math teachers, I bet one of them is a leader, whether formal or informal, right? Is maybe a lead teacher, maybe a department head, maybe whatever. I don't care. I don't know how teachers are broken down. Having 8 teachers that teach the same subject, maybe they're all different levels of math. I don't know.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of weird too.
Seems like a lot, but I don't know how big the high school is. I don't know any information about the high school. I don't know any information about the teachers. And sure, people are going to potentially say, Kelly, you're going off without having all the information. Here's the information I need. First of all, I don't need all of the information to have an opinion on that this is wrong and this is promoting violence as a solution to a problem. There is, we talked about this pre-production, and there is almost no way that you can make a connection from those costumes and how to solve a math problem. If you have to explain yourself and come up with this excuse, then it didn't translate well. And here's the other thing that is almost so obvious to me, it almost makes me angry that they didn't think of this. It's not a surprise they didn't, but it makes me angry that they didn't think of this. The uproar now is they're trying to depict themselves as victims because they are receiving death threats, threats of violence, and so forth. Well, what do you expect? You're wearing a shirt that promotes violence as a solution, and you think it's funny, but there is a significant portion of our population who absolutely does not think that that was funny.
Yeah.
All right. And what do you think they're going to say when you're promoting violence as a solution to a problem in a school setting where if you have 8 math teachers, I'm guessing that's a fairly good size school district, fairly good size high school. And I am guessing there's a couple of thousand kids that were talking about what those teachers were wearing at school, even if it wasn't during school, because somebody saw them, because it's all over the internet right now.
All kids have phones usually, unless they're in one of those, phone ban, whatever places, but still, so guaranteed a lot of the kids probably took pictures of this. And
the level of incompetency, the level of inconsideration, the level of inappropriateness at doing this is almost beyond my comprehension.
I feel like if you could do a dress up for Halloween in a school, maybe the teacher's costume shouldn't be like gory. Like, why does it have to be gory? Why can't you dress up as like a character or something? Why does it have to be like one of the most violent things you could think of like half your shirt being bloodied? Like, that blows my mind.
That's a good point, right? Taking it outside of the realm of schools, there was somewhat of an uproar, not as big as this, but some of how desensitized America has become. And the question out there is, have they taken Halloween and the gore too far?
Oh, yeah. I mean,
just decorating the houses and
there's some Halloween crazy parties. Stuff. As you go into those Halloween stores, it's like, holy cow, what the heck?
Exactly. And they're making it more and more real, right? Because it's one thing to have an amateur depict something, whereas then you have professionals like prop people who are now making things that are like as realistic as you can make them, right? And when there's money involved, so you're going to get that evolution of making it better and better all the time and more gory. But there's been this sort of desensitization. You know what I'm trying to say? Desensitization, whatever it's supposed to sound like. You get it, of America. And then you bring that into the school setting and you're like, you guys are killing me. And pun was intended there. This is ridiculous. And here's one of the final things I will say on it. How inappropriate is it for the school administration to say, we're not going to do anything because they said it was how to solve a math problem? Stop. Take a look at the impact this is having. And if you are not taking any sort of administrative action, I don't care what that is, if you are not seeing it for what it actually did, then as an administrator, you're just as incompetent as they are. This kills me. And look, we're going to get in our main body of the discussion today. But I'm going to ask you again. I ask you this all the time. What are the 3 objectives in school safety?
Stop the killing, stop the dying, start the recovery.
That is not just when we have shots being fired. It is in our actions every day. What are we doing to support kids in healthy behaviors, in correcting their pathway down the wrong road, whatever that's going to lead to? And then we have to look at the other side of it. What are we doing that is also promoting kids that might be on that pathway? We don't know. We've talked about this, I don't know how many times. A
lot.
We do it all the time because people do stuff like this.
Yeah.
And I will venture to say, I'm going to say this for 2 reasons. One, nobody really can prove me wrong, but I believe this to be true. I believe that there are probably multiple people inside every school building who is thinking about how to do harm to people inside that school building, regardless of where you're at. And we're doing stuff like this. And we're saying this is okay, not only from an individual perspective, from a group perspective, and then reaffirmed by the administration. It's okay.
It's wild.
And it is not okay. It will never be okay to do this. I don't care what the context was meant to be. It was horrible from my perspective.
Yeah, that was pretty bad. All right, so
yeah, let's move on to the happy stuff.
Yeah, hopefully they're happy stuff. So this will be the talking about the last phase, which is
recovery.
The phase that is not often looked into or talked about or really established as well as the other ones.
Let me ask you this. When you say that, you have 4 phases, right?
Mm-hmm.
Prevention, mitigation, preparedness, response, recovery. Of those 4, I want you to list them in order of starting with most to least addressed.
Response is easily the most addressed. That's an easy one. I would say probably the prevention and mitigation is second.
Mm-hmm.
And then preparation, and then recovery.
Right? Recovery's last.
Yeah.
Most talked about. We don't want to traumatize our kids. We want to get them help. We want to support them, right? So if you look at traumatizing or traumatization of children, we could use that as bang, right?
Mm-hmm.
For that kid who was emotionally traumatized, physically traumatized, psychologically traumatized, however you want to classify it, we have to start that recovery. That's what puts kids into crisis. We often look at school safety as a collected or a collective, a single event that impacts the entire school. But if we are identifying kids who have been traumatized and not helping them recover from an individual perspective, you could have greater impact. Generally speaking, what we're talking about is behavioral threat assessment and management. But we're doing it before it ever reaches the level of threat. Does that make sense?
So you're looking at this right now as each individual kid really could have their own
Crisis.
timeline, not just an event, but each person has their own timeline. And maybe the bang has already happened, or it's about to, or something like that, and you're trying to figure out where they're at.
So the answer
Hopefully, I
to
don't know if I
that
got that
is
right, but
you you did. We look at an event timeline.
Mhm.
Every incident has a timeline. And we think that it's linear. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. That's not always the case. I would argue, especially when we're talking about violence, and I don't want to overemphasize violence because you could be involved in many, many different incidences. And you're probably more likely to be involved in an incident that is non-violent related, right? When we're talking about an incident that reaches the level of being potentially hazardous to the entire population, chances are that you've had a series of smaller incidences that you did not pay attention to. So when you ask, does every individual have an incident timeline? The answer to that is yes. They probably have had several incidences that you have either ignored or inappropriately addressed, not sufficiently addressed. So the answer to your question is yes. And if we look at putting the individual child on a timeline and we look at when they were victimized, so we often connect that to being bullied or neglected or abused or whatever. But to them, that instance where they feel helpless or victimized or traumatized, that's their bang.
Mm.
And we're not responding to that correctly or insufficiently or dismissing it. Oh, that's just this. It might be a very low level, but to that child, it might be very significant. It might be the 10th or 15th or 100th time that's occurred. And we're not tracking all the previous ones. And at some point, that individual is going to say, all right, this has got to stop. I need a solution. And they're going to start marching down a different pathway. So if we're really addressing recovery, we're looking at, let's go back more towards a simpler form of recovery, right? If we're looking at recovery from a traumatic experience, we have to understand the level of that and the potential for the level of trauma that was caused based upon the incident. So we have to look into it. If we're going to strictly go to the 4 phases of an emergency or an incident, we have prevention, preparedness, response, and recovery. We always think of those as very linear. You got to do this first. You got to do prevention mitigation first. You got to do preparedness second. Then you got to respond. And then you got to recovery. We've already talked briefly about what are the 3 objectives for school safety. Stop the killing, stop the dying, start the recovery. At no point have we ever said it starts here. There's an assumption that it starts as bang occurs, as the incident is initiated. There's that assumption. The problem is if that's where you think you need to start recovery, you're, again, way behind the incident curve line. And you'll be playing catch up all of the time. If you don't understand your hazards sufficiently and the potential for your hazards and threats, you are not preparing properly for the recovery of that incident. It is more than just how do we get to school the next day. There are many questions about recovery that have to be thought of as part of the prevention mitigation phase, which is generally, that's when you start your planning, right? You prevention your mitigation phase helps you identify your threats and hazards. Well, then you got to start a plan, because you got to prepare your staff how to respond to those threats and hazards. Prepared, and we talked about this before, response is the activation of your preparedness plans, your operational plans. But we don't just stop responding and then say, okay, now we're in recovery. What are you going to need to recover? What are the elements of your recovery that you're going to need should you be confronted with this hazard or threat? If you require a reunification operation and you've never planned for a reunification, you've never practiced a reunification operation, you have no idea where you're going to do it or how you're going to do it.
Oh boy.
But we're there, right? We have many districts who have never practiced it. They have no idea what they're going to do.
That makes my head hurt.
Right? But we see it all the time when we look at an event, and it takes them 4 or 5 or 6 up to longer than 8 hours in a couple. And if you don't understand the potential for reunification and that you're going to need it, then it's crazy. Because what is causing the most anxiety and the most trauma to the survivors, whoever those are, and their families? Separation.
Yeah.
Right? I can't get my kid. I can't get to my mom. I can't get to my dad. I want my mom. I want my dad.
So when you're saying like up to 8 hours or something, like, were you saying that that's how long kids are like in the classroom or like at
From
school?
the time of the incident to the time that they were reunited with their kids was 8 hours, or their families was 8 hours.
That's crazy.
Right?
That's gonna feel like a really long time, depending, like if you're in that worst case scenario, like that's gonna feel like forever.
Right. And I want to say it was more than 8 hours, but I'm going to stick with the 8 hours.
Wow.
And I'm not going to say the event, because it's just silly.
Yeah. I mean, even just a few hours, I mean, that's
right. But we talked about it last time, right? We don't ever practice a full length event. We practice a small amount, 5 minutes of a lockdown drill. We might evacuate, walk out to the evacuation assembly area, right? But incidences, significant incidents aren't instantaneous. They're not, here's the alert. Okay, we're over. Thanks, you did a great job. There's stuff that has to occur.
It's almost like you're just doing it just to say that you did it.
That's right.
Which is defeating the purpose of why you're doing it.
Right. So you have to understand the potential. That's why it's a risk, threat, hazard. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to understand what it would take to recover. Right. What are your immediate needs to start the recovery? What are your midterm needs? What are your long-term needs? And when I say long-term, I'm talking we're closing in on 27 years, and many of the Columbine survivors are still in the recovery process. Yeah. There are many schools that have already addressed, and many, many more that have not addressed some of the potentials for recovery, up to including, do we demolish the building? Or do we reopen that building?
Wow.
What do we do with all of the memorials that are set up after an incident?
How long do you leave them up? And
all those teddy bears that are left, all those well wishes, all of those candles, all of those whatever that are left at the memorials out in front of your school building? What do you do with all that? Because I will tell you, if you don't handle it correctly, you're going to re-traumatize all of those people, right? So, and that's immediate to midterm planning. Immediate is, okay, we have this traumatic incident, whatever it was, and our kids are going to be anxious. Do I need counseling? Do I need to provide counseling, make counseling available? Or do I just need to identify those who are struggling and get them on a list to see a counselor in the next few days? And then do I follow up in another few days saying, hey, we had an incident. Most of you have had time to process it now. Our offer for counseling is still available. Let us know. Having some positive outreach, right?
Communication,
right? What's happening?
Figure.
What's happening to you? Are you still struggling? Those types of things. Have we educated our teachers to identify those students who are struggling after an event? Have we identified staff members and trained staff members to identify other staff members who are struggling? Have we identified training and assessments so that you know when you're struggling as a staff member? How do we address that? When do we address that? Do we address that after whatever happened? Or do we need to look at that if you look at our timeline, we have almost nothing that starts on the right of bang. We associate response to the right of bang. We associate recovery to the right of bang. And if you are on the right of bang, you have no longer have an opportunity to prevent or mitigate. You have some mitigation. They're still there, but if you haven't thought about it, you're going to be struggling there. And you have no longer a chance to prepare for it. You're responding to it. We tend to think response and recovery are to the right. Prevention and mitigation and preparedness are to the left of bang. But if you look at our timeline, we have nothing that starts on the right side.
Yeah, it all starts on the left.
It all starts on the left.
Yeah.
And there's a reason for that.
Yeah, your recovery timeline literally starts all the way at the beginning. The recovery one is the one that's all the way across.
As you're identifying your threats and hazards and risks, as you're identifying those, you should be looking at what will it take if this threat or hazard or risk is realized? What will it take to respond? What will it take to recover from? And if I can identify that, then I can understand how I need to train my staff in the preparation phase of that. You're right. As soon as we're picking that up, we should be addressing all of those other phases, those other 3 phases. And I'm going to step back a little bit because we look at it as here's this timeline from start to finish, implying that there is a finish. But there's never a finish.
No.
We put an arrow. We don't put a stop dot or a wall at the far right side of the timeline. So initially I said, you no longer have right of bang. You no longer have the opportunity to prevent or mitigate or prepare for. It's not actually true. It is true for the incident that you are currently faced with. But if you do an after action, what you're really trying to do is take the lessons you've learned to help you address the next prevention mitigation phase, the next preparedness phase, the next response phase, the next recovery. What were we lacking here? Should we ever have to do it again? What did we learn? I've said this many, many times. I was the incident commander for a shooting in my jurisdiction. Not to go into any detail about that. Here's what propelled me down this path. I made a lot of mistakes. I did some things mostly right, but I made a lot of mistakes. And the best thing that I ever could have done in that incident was start learning, because I wasn't prepared. I had a lot of experience already because we had so many other large-scale emergencies. I had an idea of what needed to be done. But I was never an incident commander in the formal sense of a large incident. This was the first one. And I'd done some things and I was kind of like, oh, okay, they're going to just assign me a task and so forth. But I never thought about where did those tasks come from? Where did they get assigned from? Who's assigning them? And then when I became the incident commander, it became very apparent that I needed to start making assignments and doing and so forth, right? I needed to start tasking things out. But there are a lot of mistakes that I made. And there were a lot of things that I needed to work on. And so I started almost immediately as the world turns. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to do this right away. It was, there was a long process. And part of it was really beneficial to me was learning from other people who have had the same incidences that I had and learning what I needed to do. And then teaching other people what they needed to do. Coming up with policies, training people, that type of stuff. Reviewing each of the subsequent events that I was involved with. Right? But it was a long, long process. In fact, my event was in 2014. And to this day, I am still learning. I talk to other people. Things have changed, even in the short time that I've been retired. Things have changed. I still have some very good friends involved in the business of emergency management, so I keep in touch with them all of the time. And we talk about this stuff, what they're doing, what I'm doing. I talk to schools. I talk to other school safety professionals. The point here is that it's cyclical. If you want to use the timeline as a two-dimensional timeline, it's two-dimensional as much as the world is. Right? So you have an equator. Use the equator as your linear timeline. and it's going to come back around to the other side. As straight as you walk, at some point, you're going to get to where you just started from at some point. And that goes for both equators, the east-west equator and the north-south equator. You're going to end up at the same point. So whether you're on the X or the Y axis, you're going to end up at the same point. Just following that journey, that's going to push us back. So the recovery for the next event starts during your current event, which started before your current event. Some of the things that you have to consider is, how do we get our kids back to our families? Right? So we've talked about the expectations or the objectives in school safety. What are the expectations of our families? We've been over this a few times, but it's been a while. And so when we talk about the expectations, there is no greater expectation of these three things than when you have an incident. And that is, every day when your families wake up, they expect that their kids can get to school safely. Once they are there, that you as school administrators and educators and school professionals, support staff, that once they are there, that you are going to create a safe and supportive environment. And at the end of the day, you are going to return them safely, at hopefully better than when they arrived at school that morning, more educated, whatever, right? But that you've returned them safely at the end of the day. And when you talk about reunification, that's what you're trying to do, is get them back to their families as safely as you can. And if you don't understand that process, you're causing anxiety. I don't care how well you addressed all of the other stuff. If you don't get your kids back to their families quickly, you're going to hear about it. That's one of those things.
You're going to have parents standing out there, and the longer they stand out there, the worse it's going to get.
Poor reunification practices, operations, procedures have cost people their jobs. Even if they've done everything else correctly.
Because all it takes is like a group of parents that are like, why did it take so long? And it just will spiral and show up to your board meetings. And
I don't know how many times I've been to a school board association conference or event where I'm trying, and I get it, I'm a vendor. As much as I hate to say that, I get it. I am. I'm a vendor that identifies as a school safety expert. When you engage them at these conferences and stuff, how many of them politely say, yeah, I'll make sure that my safety guy has this? As a school board member, as a superintendent, as the school executive staff, assistants and department heads and stuff, you have an absolute obligation to make sure that those people who are under you understand school safety.
Safety is a shared responsibility.
And I'm going to take it one step further. School safety is a shared obligation.
Oh, there we go. That's a better word. Yeah, we should have done that one.
In many cases, I can't think of one state that doesn't have this, but I could be wrong. Both morally and legally.
Yeah.
You have an obligation to keep your kids safe. Some of it's state mandated, some of it's federally mandated. I'm telling you, if you're not doing this correctly, you're playing with fire. The two sticks that you are rubbing together to make fire are likely dynamite. it's going to take a long time, but when it happens, it's going to explode.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's crazy. And when I see things like what we talked about at the beginning, it really does. I just don't understand it. I don't. One of the biggest things that, and I understand. I have a long time in this business and associated businesses with this.
Yeah, you've been living in this arena for quite some time.
Yeah, over
Just in the
40
whole
years.
safety realm,
Yeah,
you've
yeah,
been living
yeah,
it. So,
yeah. And I understand that, and I understand that most people don't live in that world, and I understand that most people don't want to, and I totally get it. But the fact of the matter is you have an obligation to at least live in part of that.
yeah. I mean, the kind of like what you've said before is like Columbine was 26, almost 27 years ago, and it's like that. I mean, there was obviously events that happened before, but that was, the watershed moment. That's when really things started to ramp up in school safety technology and all that. And it's like if you've gone into education after that, like you have to know that like things like this can happen. You have to have some amount of interest in school safety. You can't just completely ignore it.
Right. So I don't want to belabor this too much longer, but when we start talking about the potential for violence, and of all shootings that occur on a school campus, something like 60% of them are outside of the building.
Hmm.
That means 40% of those, only 40% of those are inside.
40% still quite a bit, but
It's still quite a bit, but
yeah,
when you talk about the number of actual incidents,
sure. Yeah.
and the amount of effort that we're putting on the inside versus the outside,
Mm.
and those things that we've talked about in recent podcasts about, unfortunately, some of the information that I've been concerned about and saying, hey, we need to start considering this stuff, is coming to fruition. And I hate that I'm wrong, but I'm
Yeah.
not. From Kelly's perspective, it's not shocking that I'm right. But
Wow.
I mean, if I can see it, you should be able to as well,
Yeah.
right? If you see something that's happening, it can happen at your. I mean, I'll give you shooter from an elevated position. Have we had that in the last couple of months?
Yep.
Yes. Have we had that before? Yes.
Yes.
Potential violence outside of your school at a sporting event? Yes. Outside of a security area?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Right. Like I said, I was in Atlanta at a safety summit this past week. And one of the primary conversations was the guy that was arrested at the airport that had made threats and was looking around in the terminal, had firearms in his car. I mean, and rightfully so, they're touting that as an adverted act. But that's stuff that we've talked about on this. I talk about in an airport, where's the most dangerous places to be?
Yeah, you've literally said that multiple times.
Multiple times. TSA, baggage claim, any
Yeah.
of those places where people are sitting there waiting and there's no security or much less security. When we're talking about recovery, that's all started at the beginning. And the best way to recovery is prevention. The
Mm-hmm.
best way to recovery is preparing for the incident and what you are going to need should it happen. The best way to recovery is, if you have to respond, you respond in a way that decreases the potential for trauma. The things that you
Mm.
are doing is done in a manner that reduces trauma. The best way to recovery is planning for recovery, practicing what you need to do for recovery. Reunification, getting your kids and your staff back to their families as quickly as possible. That still seems to be a big struggle for schools. Let's start working on that.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. And if you have any questions about what we discussed, leave a comment on our website at crisisgo.com. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you next time on Coffee with Kelly, a discussion on school safety.